Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's me. In this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we are going to talk about NASA's Boeing Starliner 1. Yes, it's related to shipping in that it is an aspect of aerospace transportation. This is a crazy story of the first attempt to launch NASA's new crew capsule, the Starliner. The ship was placed on top of a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket, and this launch was scheduled for Wednesday, December at 11:05 p.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral. And then, just before the launch, there were some issues discovered with one of the valves on board the Starliner. The valve was supposed to automatically open and close to allow fuel to flow into the capsule, and they decided that they did not trust that the valve would work properly, so they held off on launching the vehicle. They tried to resolve the issue but were unable to do so, and so the launch was scrubbed. Okay, so let's talk about this vehicle itself. How cool is this thing? This is really cool. It looks like a real-life version of those little space capsules that you used to see in old-school video games. You remember those games where you had to navigate through all these mazes and try to get your little spaceship to the end without getting blown up by asteroids? Yeah, that's what this thing looks like. Of course, this is a much more advanced capsule than something you would find in a video game. But still, when I saw a picture of this thing, the first thing that popped into my head was an old-school video game. Starliner is a crude Star Trek Enterprise meets International Orange Cone. It is a silver and white colored crude with a dome-shaped top and a black trim ring around the base of the cone. This is a crew spacecraft designed to carry 4 people into low Earth orbit. One of the things that's notable about this vehicle is how small it is. Starliner has a diameter of just under 17 feet and a height of 20 feet. To put this into context, Apollo, the previous NASA crew capsule, had a diameter of over 27 feet. So yeah, Starliner is pretty small. But even though it is small, it does have plenty of room for its 4 astronauts. But that's because the astronauts actually sit in a square formation inside the capsule rather than the more traditional 3 seats arranged in a row that you would see in something like Apollo. For people, sitting in a square arrangement gives the additional benefit of allowing each person to have a window to look out of. And this will be especially useful during emergency aborts, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the video. Boeing worked on the Starliner capsule as part of the Commercial Crew Program. This is a NASA program aimed at developing the next generation of crewed vehicles. The Commercial Crew Program was started in 2010 after the Space Shuttle fleet was retired. At that point, NASA had no ability to send its own astronauts into space. It was forced to pay Russia millions of dollars to buy seats on Soyuz spacecraft. The Commercial Crew Program was designed to develop American-made spacecraft that could carry astronauts safely to the ISS. As part of this program, both Boeing and SpaceX developed their own crew capsules. SpaceX's capsule is called the Dragon, and Boeing's is the Star. Both of these companies also built their own launch vehicles to send their respective capsules into space. SpaceX built the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets to send the Dragon, and the Starliner is sent aloft by the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket. As mentioned earlier, the Starliner was supposed to launch atop an Atlas V rocket. This is a medium-heavy lift rocket that stands 195 feet tall. This rocket consists of a common core booster stage and 2 strap-on solid fuel side boosters. The rocket is topped off with the Centaur upper stage and then finally the Starliner capsule. The Atlas V is a very reliable rocket, having successfully completed 86 launches prior to the Starliner mission. But even though the rocket itself is very reliable, that does not guarantee the safety of whatever it is carrying into space. In fact, this is one of the reasons why the launch was aborted. Because of the nature of the spacecraft, there are very strict requirements for sending it into space. Every single system on board this capsule has to be working perfectly fine. There is zero margin for error. If any system on board the capsule fails, then it could be catastrophic. The problem that they found during pre-flight checks involved a mechanical valve located in the capsule service module. This is the part of the capsule that supports the crew and provides various life support systems. The valve in question was supposed to automatically open and close to allow fuel to flow into the capsule. But during pre-flight checks, engineers discovered that the valve was not responding properly to commands. They were able to manually override the valve and force it open, but they couldn't get it to close again. This meant that if they launched the capsule in this condition, they wouldn't be able to control the fuel flow once the capsule was in space, and without proper fuel control, the capsule could potentially explode. Now, I don't know about you, but I would not want to be aboard a spacecraft that might explode in midair. Luckily, the astronauts scheduled for this flight, NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, along with Japanese astronaut Soichi Noguchi, were not on board during this test flight. Instead, the capsule is carrying a test dummy named Rosie. Rosie is a female humanoid test dummy wearing a spacesuit. She is being used to test the fit and the comfort of the capsule. Now, I think it's kind of funny that they sent a test dummy wearing a spacesuit. Like, it makes you wonder how tight the spacesuits are in there. Like, is it a snug fit? Does it leave marks on her arms? Is she sweating? I don't know. Anyway, now that Rosie has missed out on her chance to go to space, NASA will have to schedule another launch date to send her. The good news is that because of how reliable the Atlas V rocket is, they should be able to quickly turn around and launch the Starliner on another day. But choosing a new launch date won't be easy. The Atlas V rocket can only launch during a very small window of opportunity. That's because the capsule needs to reach a very specific speed and trajectory to be able to dock with the ISS. Once it reaches orbit, the Starliner will perform a series of maneuvers to raise its orbit until it is high enough to dock with the ISS. But there is a limited amount of time in which the capsule can do this. If it takes too long to raise its orbit, then the ISS will pass out of range. Also, they need to take into consideration the crew schedule on board the ISS. The current occupants of the ISS need to be prepared to welcome the new arrivals. But more importantly, they need to make sure that everyone is ready to come home. Right now, there are 7 people living and working on the ISS, but in just a few days, 4 of them are scheduled to return home aboard a Soyuz capsule. They will be replaced by the 4 people arriving on the Starliner. But in order to make that work, everybody has to arrive at the correct time. If the Starliner arrives too early, then the departing crew will have nowhere to go. They can't stay on the ISS, but if the Starliner arrives too late, then the new crew will have nowhere to go. They will have to wait for another flight. And yes, there are extra cruise ships available. But those ships are only available because of the current situation with the pandemic. Normally, there are only 3 people living and working on the ISS at any given time. Having 4 crews available means that there is a lot of extra stuff that has to be coordinated. Okay, so one of the great things about this capsule is its emergency abort system. In the event of an emergency, the crew can press a button that will blow a hole in the side of the capsule. This will release a giant parachute that will descend the crew down to the ground. This system is designed to ensure that the crew can escape safely in the event of an emergency, such as an explosion or a crash. Now, obviously, ideally the capsule doesn't explode or crash, but just in case it does, they want to make sure the crew is safe. The astronauts will exit the capsule through the top hatch, and they will land in the parachutes inside their spacesuits. Once they are in the parachutes, they will float down to the ground. This is a pretty wild concept. I mean, I've never heard of a spacecraft that lands its crew via parachute. Most spacecraft either land in a controlled descent on a runway, or they use a combination of parachutes and airbags to bring the capsule down. But this seems like it is a pretty cool way to get down. I imagine that landing in this thing would feel kind of like skydiving, except you wouldn't have to worry about deploying your own parachute. It would basically be like a giant umbrella that opens up beside you and brings you slowly down to the ground. Well, that concludes this episode of What's Going On with Shipping. It's me. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. Leave a comment, share this video, and give it a thumbs up.